Hi everyone, my name is Abhiram and I'm the events executive at UCL Fintech. Today we have a really interesting talk by Sohail Raja from Société Générale, and he is going to be talking about racial diversity in technology and the future of technology as well. Um, so I'd like to now ask Sohail to come on the stream, and if you could please introduce yourself and introduce your role.
Hi, Ibrahim. How are you? Thank you for inviting me to the session today. As you mentioned, my name's Sohail Raja. I work at Société Générale. I'm the head of execution platforms for our SG Markets platform, which is our business-to-business wholesale market platform, and I look after anything to do with pricing and trading, both internally and to our clients. In hand with that, I'm also the UK representative for the digital office, so looking to build out the digital platform specifically for the UK branch as well, and I'm part of the senior management team in the UK.
Wow, that is really interesting, and you've got a lot going on. And I've noticed that since the year 2000, you've worked at a variety of places, including PwC, Nomura, Commerzbank Securities. How has your journey been? How did it all start, and how was your journey along the way?
Well, it started well before that, unfortunately. As you can probably tell, I'm not a Gen Z or a millennial on this particular talk. So it started well before that. I went to King's College, London, in the late 80s, finished in the 90s, went to Warwick and did a master's there. I was really interested in technology at that time. Technology as we know it now was very different to what it was back then. It was very much the early days, and I think the internet and web technologies are still kind of in its infancy, but we've seen a lot of traction, particularly in the last few years. But the kind of the guts of it really was quite basic nearly 30 years ago. So I went to Warwick because it was the only place at that time that was doing technology in a more practical fashion. It was very theoretical before, very old languages being used like Ada, Pascal, things like that, which is still used in some organizations. But what interested me about Warwick was that they were part of they just built out the Warwick Manufacturing Group. And that was something that was sponsored by the government at the time, the British government. And the head professor there was, I can't remember his first name now, was Lord Bhattacharya. And he was really interested in the setup of a technology to develop automotive businesses and to look at the whole supply chain. Data was a big thing in those days, right? Data science was already there in terms of that whole just-in-time supply chain, understanding financial side, building cars using robots. It was fascinating, and the technology behind that was pretty impressive for that time. And that's the reason why I got involved in that degree and that location. But from there, I moved into technology roles, graduate training roles at GEC, again, manufacturing, so not straight into banking. Unfortunately, I managed to work in a startup, an American startup, focusing on the top 20 banks at that time to build out the European franchise for professional services. And I was quite young, I was in my mid 20s to go and do that and work with some major banks who had branches in Europe. So in this pre-internet, so you actually physically had to go to the branches to install software. And this was a back office, middle office application. Yeah, it was great. My first experience of a startup pre-internet. And that really bode me well. I managed to work out in Asia and build out a similar proposition out in Singapore as well. So I was based in Singapore for a short period of time, as well as being in London. And we were working with banks like JP Morgan, Chase Manhattan, in those days, Chase at least anyway, Merrill Lynch, etc. And their technology footprint was amazing. I mean, they would just go off in those days, go and buy the latest equipment, go and buy the latest technology, and basically build something from scratch. So very innovative in terms of their approach, in terms of their attitude, entrepreneurialism, all of those sort of things. Somebody had a business idea, a product idea, and said, "Well, build a stack for me," and they would just go and buy the kit, get it set up, and off you would go. So that was really exciting to me. And then internet came along, and I wanted to get my head around e-commerce, and I worked for one of the first online UK e-commerce companies, a company called Intranet. They were based in Reading, just outside of Reading, in a village called Goring-on-Thames, and they worked on the first online e-commerce propositions in retail banking and also insurance and mortgages. So having people like Eagle Star, Co-op Bank now as we know it with Smile. So this is well before the kind of neobank, challenger bank that we know today, as it were, with the likes of Starling or Monzo. This was done, I don't know, 20, 30 years, 20 years ago now. First set of internet proposition, really to look at using internet for the next kind of digital distribution channel or web channel. And from there, I moved back into banking. E-commerce was a big play within investment banking. They really wanted to offer electronic communication, electronic trading to clients internally as well as to external clients. And I built out the e-commerce platform out in Commerzbank. And then I went to ABN AMRO and built out the e-commerce platform for structured products there as well. But that was much more front office, and I was given a remit in terms of revenue line, having a real revenue kind of top level, but also to build out the technology stack as well. So it's quite an all-encompassing role, quite exciting as well to build out both the B2C, which is unusual for an investment bank to have done that. It's you see Marcus with Goldman, but ABN AMRO delivered well over 10 years ago now the first business to consumer platform to our clients with a CFD trading platform. And then we built out a business to business platform as well. And that moved to RBS, and we did some work there, worked with the institutional team there. And then have been at SocGen since, brought over by the head of sales at on the derivatives platform to help out build their e-commerce proposition as well, and now moved from structured products to multi-asset, and then to the role that I mentioned before in terms of building out a digital platform for the UK. So that's a bit of a history, and mixed in that, I did some consultancy work at PwC, post the work at Intranet, and also did some B2B work, e-commerce on the pension side as well. So quite a diverse mix, but very much focused on financial services.
Wow, that sounds like a really interesting journey, and I'm sure you've learned a lot along the way. Working at so many different firms, what were the lessons you learned at each individual firm, or what were the different diverse aspects of each individual firm?
Um, I think I got to say I've been quite fortunate, right, in terms of every place that I worked at. They were very open to ideas, very open to changing approaches, even very innovative. And I looked for those kind of opportunities where innovation and being brave and being smart around what the future may look like and implementing it now. So even though we might know in 3 years' time, we know the market was going to move in that direction. And I've been really fortunate that I've worked for those firms on the whole that have thought along those lines or taken on board what I thought was coming and how we might be able to be ready for that. And obviously within the challenges of a corporate organization, because you still have a culture and a way of doing things that you have to accept, but also embrace as well, because there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, and client relationships that we have to take into account, and we mustn't forget that. So it's getting the balance right between the existing culture, where the business is going, and kind of implementing those solutions in a smart way that is embraced by the organization, but also by customers and by clients as well. So in that regard, I've been quite fortunate to been able to do that. I know that not many people can say that, but the experience at SunGard, at Intranet, at ABN AMRO were probably three startups that I got involved in, even though the one at ABN AMRO was probably a startup within a corporate, and SG is slightly different because you're building a business to business platform within a bank, but taking the ethos of startups, fintech philosophies, fintech setups, and infrastructure within a business to business environment.
Wow, that was really insightful, and there was just a lot of things going on, and you seem to have brought on a lot of innovation and pioneering a lot of these things. And what was your most surprising aspect of most of these jobs, especially your current job? What shocked you the most when you started out?
I don't think I've ever been really surprised by anything that I've worked or approached. Just my mindset is kind of it's a new challenge if there's something. But surprising, I think, in the sense, it's Société Générale as how much they've embraced digital transformation for a bank with a steeped history, steeped approach in terms of client relationships and dealing with and working with both internally as well as with clients, but also culturally, and how they have taken the mantra in terms of digital transformation and having digital platforms to service their clients now, but also in the future. And we're seeing a lot of evolution also on the retail side. So the innovation teams on the retail side are doing some great stuff with Shine, for example, which is a entrepreneur SME type platform, which has been purchased and brought into SocGen, and we'll be looking at how we use that for SME clients going forward. But I think the whole general nature of embracing digital platforms, but also embracing them in the context of our business and the context of what our clients are looking for or probably trending towards.
Well, yeah, that was really insightful. And having worked in a lot of fintechs and working with a lot of digitization, what do you see the future of fintech and digitization going towards?
That's a really difficult question to answer, right? I think it's the pace of it is incredible at the moment, and the amount of information that's there. Every day there's something going on, right? There's an initiative here, initiative there. There's funding going on. It's pretty amazing what's going on in this space in fintech and in finance and in technology and in general. So reality is we don't know what the bets are going to be going forward. There's a whole from a corporate perspective, at least a lot of challenges around digitalization and transformation. And I think that biggest challenge is much more around culture and mindset change, of being a lot more fleet of foot when it comes to client needs and client requirements, and even internally. So if we're facing off to a client, we need to make sure our salespeople, our operation people, anyone that's facing off to clients, and let's face it, everybody now is facing off to clients in one way or another, that we've got the information to hand that we can support the clients, whether that be through operational intelligence or revenue intelligence or even opportunity intelligence, using our data science capabilities to be able to be adding to those relationships, not just doing it for the sake of data science or using a deep learning algorithm which may not be relevant for what we do on a day-to-day basis. It's kind of being still mindful of what we're trying to do. So I only see that going to increase even further, but hand in hand with how we liaise and work with clients. And I think on the technology side, we've seen, we know the story with Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud. We've seen all of that, and again, that's been amazing and impressive how Amazon has built out this framework of technologies and capabilities, and then be able to kind of sell that on. And I think a lot of things we'll see will be eventually moving to the cloud. And I think that will probably develop new business models and maybe new business opportunities as well. And thirdly, I think also around how we collaborate with clients, because I see clients also moving into this space, particularly with the pandemic and what's happened there. I think clients want to be in a lot more control than they were previously. Not that they weren't in control, but I mean in terms of their data, in terms of information flow, in terms of which partners they want to talk to. And it's important as SocGen that we continue those relationships and are able to show that kind of path of collaboration, whether it's through data, through pricing, through a number of things. It could be self-service, and making sure that we're on in that space and having those level of conversations with our clients. So it's only going to increase, much so.
Yeah, and you were mentioning a lot about deep learning and big data, which are huge
Mm,
buzzwords in this current day. And AI and machine learning has been increasing exponentially. How has AI and machine learning actually impacted the bank, and have has the bank actually implemented any AI models for any different sectors within the bank?
No, absolutely. I mean, I kind of reference back to my degree in masters at manufacturing. We were using as part of the work there, machine learning modules. It's just that we didn't have the processing power, right, to kind of predict supply chain impact or raw materials or cost or whatever. But the engines were there. The processing just wasn't there at the time. So the difference now really is those machine learning algorithms that are standard. Now the processing power is there that we're able to apply that relatively quickly and apply models relatively quickly as well. And as you can imagine, with the bank, we have quite a lot of data, and we need to kind of understand how we service that. So, a couple of examples one would be documentation. It's a bane of everyone's organization, but how do we automate that? How do we digitize that? How do we reduce the amount of document flow? Not have OCR engines to scan documents and things like that, and really looking at how do we develop templates, how do we develop clauses, for example, if you're doing a deal sheet or a term sheet with a client or with a number of clients because you've been working with other banks. So really looking how do we automate that and become much more operationally efficient is one example. Another example is around deals, for example, as another area, and how do we kind of be more efficient around what deals would be more relevant to our clients, and those deals that would, if we had syndicated loans, for example, who would be the partners that we should approach on certain conditions that a client was looking for, whether it be over a term, over it be a particular underlying, particular asset class, and be able to model those and then use that as a supporting our sales and our engineers and structured teams to be able to get to those decisions a little bit quicker, but be more informed rather than completely reliant on those engines being the final production of that result. We need to look at the result, look at the sentiment, look at how we reach that decision, how we reach the recommendation, and look at all the logic behind that before we say, look, we go with that. So it's still human led in terms of final decision making, in terms of deep learning and those sort of things. Not right now. That's not where we're at. It's much more the kind of structured, unstructured approach with data, kind of handhold learning as we go along. So it's much more supportive at this stage.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And obviously, at the point where AI is at, it is quite difficult to completely rely fully on AI. And it is interesting that there's a whole hybrid type of situation where there's a lot of AI along with human interaction. You also mentioned cloud computing, which is also a huge branch, especially amongst the pandemic. And what are your thoughts on the security of cloud computing? Because previously, in like the older years, you would just have a normal server and you would keep your own server to yourself. There wouldn't be much security concerns. What about security when it comes to cloud computing services?
Well, I think the security point is valid, and you know I think get slightly confused between cloud and the difference between cloud and say ASP models. So ASP models, so service provision before, follows a kind of similar model. So if you're outsourcing your server environment to a farm somewhere, you still have to go through those protocols around security, around data retention, around data protection, and those are still there, whether it's the cloud or it's outsourced. So you're going through the similar approach, and we've been there before with SG and other banks, and we will continue with that diligence. So even regulators are picking this up and are being involved on the cloud infrastructure side, which helps with decision making. So it's not everything will move to the cloud, not from day one. It's going to take some time until there's more confidence, if I can use that, and more examples of where we are seeing elements or provisioning moving towards the cloud. But I think it's an eventuality. It's just a question of how much time it will take. And as you rightly point out, security and regulation and regulators need to be comfortable with what we're doing, as well as clients, in terms of ensuring that they understand that their information is protected.
Yes, that is very insightful, and I think for a lot of students that are viewing this, it's currently internship season and applying for spring weeks and things like that. What sort of advice would you give students when applying for spring weeks internships?
Yeah, it's difficult, right? It's challenging at the moment, but a lot of banks, as we are as well, offering programs of some description or another. I think in my space, and I'm a hybrid between the business and working with technology. That really the space is moving towards being very hands-on in terms of using technology. You don't have to be an IT or a developer, but think of the days when we were using Excel spreadsheets to do pricing, and that's still there. Using Excel, using VBA, using Monte Carlo simulation as an example, or building out indices or building out data sets to help with decision making. Really, the skill set's moving now much more towards Python, and I think anyone with some sort of Python background or use of Python going out of their way a little bit to say, okay, we haven't got bank data, but we can get data sources from NASDAQ or from NYSE or FTSE or whatever, and be able to use that data set which is available. Being able to apply some machine learning logic, not machine, sorry, Python data analysis around that, and using Jupyter notebooks is something else that we're seeing people are using in terms of data, not cleansing, but at least data structure. I think that those would be handy, and then being able to explain it in the context of the business, the commercial reality of the benefit of using it, and what interests, what insights you're gleaning from that, I think are going to be helpful. And any kind of link with data and integrating with an API and pulling that data into an application and then applying some sort of machine learning logic around that would be awesome, right? So I think if that would be something that I would definitely, I mean, I don't know how it's taught in university, but in terms of what I would be looking for in terms of graduates coming to me to want to work with us in the summer or any trainee roles going forward, those are the ones that I'd be particularly interested to have a conversation with around opportunities and projects and whatnot. So that's key. I think the ability to develop prototypes or proof of concepts using Python, using some very basic rudimentary web capabilities, but the ability to understand APIs, being able to read them and be able to pull data from that and glean business insight is really valuable.
That's very true, especially in the modern day with machine learning and big data. Python plays an immense role with TensorFlow, sklearn, and all
Exactly.
these different languages that help with machine learning. And so,
And
yeah, definitely Python is a huge skill. And
exactly.
would there be any other programming languages that you would suggest would?
I think that's fine. I think basically as a starter, I think if you want to get into capital markets or investment banking or global markets, I think that really helps if you're able to do that. And a lot of this stuff is open source now, right? And it's free. So you can take it to a certain level, and we all understand that and appreciate that. Even Python, right, to a certain level is free. Jupyter Notebooks is also free and open source. Even some of the machine learning algorithms out there are also available as open source setup. So you don't need to pay for it. It's something that you could do. You can even do it on a very basic laptop. You don't need to have a super duper or highly spec'd up laptop. I know most students have Apple Macs anyway, so you guys will be fine, right?
Yeah, that's very true. And outside of the whole academic sort of setting, what else could students do to make themselves stand out when applying?
Um, Not an easy one. I think what we don't want to have is people coming cookie cut, right, and saying like I've done Python and I've done this and I've done that. It's easy to see when somebody's done something that it actually the thought process they went through, the actual output. So really be mindful of that. Don't assume that you've done a Python tick, this tick, this tick. My team, for example, would really look into, if you use GitHub, for example, to deploy your code or the Python scripts, we would really look into that and would see whether it was copied from somewhere else. So, be mindful of that. If you do go down that route, really do it because you want to know the ins and outs. Also understand the challenges and able to explain how you got this far, but you got stuck on this, and that's fine. It's absolutely fine. It's just good for us to see how people have gone through the thought process, how they've taken those tools, and I think it's very important to be able to come up with an angle, right? So that could be, it doesn't have to be banking related. It could be non-banking related. It could be, I'm just throwing up an example, like a recommendation engine on, I don't know, somebody might be interested in clothes or fashion or lifestyle or brands or whatever, and just coming up with something interesting. So, well, I'm interested in recommendation engine for an Amazon one. Let's just use that for an example, because I can't think of another one at the moment. But it doesn't have to be banking related, right? It could be anything, but it just shows that there's a process and an interest outside of banking as well, which is I also think is healthy, and not just being thinking about banking, but thinking about products and services and other business areas which are applicable to banking, because if you move into investment banking or you're looking at research and insight, it's good to see that people are interested in other sectors, and that kind of brings that into play. So I think something where there's a story around it, about you as a person, about why you chose this approach, what was your interest, what you were trying to do. So being able to explain your idea is also really important in a capital markets environment. You've got to be able to explain your idea and also back it up with the model that you put together. So it's not just about the modeling; it's about the thought process and why you did that and how you came to a conclusion, and being able to explain that in a very concise manner, but in a very informed manner. So within a short space of time when you're in those conversations, people have got a comfort factor or confidence that you know what you're talking about, and that's it's very hard sometimes to get people's time and attention, rightly or wrongly so. But when you do get in front of somebody, it's very important to get those points across as you would in an interview in the first few minutes, right? It's a similar process.
And for students from non-finance backgrounds who are interested in tech because the tech revolution is taking off, what would you suggest, and how would they be able to learn more about tech, and what resources could they possibly use to get into more tech related things, even if they're not doing it at university?
Again, like I mentioned, you mentioned yourself, like TensorFlow and other tooling. There's a lot out there. Python programming, again, you don't have to do it with financial data. You can do it with any source of data. You can do it with engineering. If you're interested in engineering, there's so much manufacturing data out there that you could plug in and come in with a solution or something. So there are many ways in which you can use this tooling. I think data and data science clearly are growth areas, but the other area which is really important is the understanding the commercial benefits of what you're putting together and how technology can help do that. So an area that I'm really interested in at the moment is esports, and we've probably seen the growth of esports during the pandemic, but it's a massive industry, right? I mean, it has a bigger following than League of Legends, for example, has just as large a following as Super Bowl. We're talking nearly 100 million people would consistently online go to watch an esports event. And the data behind that, and the play, and the information that's used in that, and the leaderboards and dashboards, and how people are using that to furnish decision making and to work out the next strategy of winning a game, it's incredible, right? And that's just an industry that's only really been around for what, 5 years, maybe 10 years. If you look at it in the current context, and again, that's a fascinating area to look at. And I do that because I like referencing things that aren't necessarily always about banking. And it goes back to my point. If you're not interested in finance, but interested in technology, you will look at maybe finance technology, or look at some other technology stacks that are different to the area that you're in, because it always helps, and it helps as a reference to that point.
Yeah, definitely. And especially given the volatile and chaotic job market that we're currently in, I think these various skills would definitely help. And apart from that, what do you think? What is your standpoint on diversity and inclusion within the workplace, and how students from diverse backgrounds can be implemented, and how they can get into these big name firms?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy subject, right? Particularly with what we've seen during the pandemic around Black Lives Matter, and that's brought a lot of things to the fore. I mean, from a personal perspective, it's still, I still see what I saw 20 years ago. When you see some of these things, like Stephen Lawrence, for example, always comes to mind for me. It was what I saw when I was growing up, and the challenges that we see. So we can't deny that. We have to accept that it's there. The fact that we have to talk about it is also, you could argue, is disappointing, because it's obvious and clear, right? There's no argument on this. I mean, I can only tell you from my experience, and my advice would be to, yes, it's be mindful of it. Yeah, we can't ignore it. We have to understand that is there. Things will get better. They have to get better, and have got better during my time, at least in my career. But the way I kind of dealt with it is this innovation factor, right? It's kind of thinking about what's the next step, what's going on, what's happening, what is the kind of commercial benefits of, if you see something that's unique, you see something that is a trend, really grab it and be the master of that, and be the kind of unique voice on that, and keep continuing that, because that gives you something interesting to talk about, and it makes you also unique when you're actually in an organization, or once you get into one, which is always difficult anyway, right? So it's once you're in, it's kind of keeping the mantra, keeping interested. Don't always follow the cookie cutters. Think outside of the box. Think really the benefit of what you're talking about, and really don't be afraid to bring those points out. There are lots of challenges. You have cultural challenges between different races. Then you have cultural challenges when you get into organizations. Be aware of that. Be mindful of that. Don't get worried about that. Accept that is there, and accept that organizations are trying to change as well, and treat that on face value. But always think about your value, particularly in investment banking. Um, my remit has always been to generate revenue, or a commercial angle, which helps. It's not just the technology. The technology is important, but it's about collaborating, working with other people, working in other teams, but then thinking about the bottom line based on revenue, based on cost. And once you're in those organizations, that's what they're interested in. Getting in is the trick, right? That's not always easy to do, particularly at a graduate level. I think it's a lot better than what it was when I was a graduate. So the other route, obviously, is if you're really interested in banking or finance, or investment banking, that's a route you want to get into. If you're not successful in the first time, then think about smaller firms. Think about non investment banking. Maybe think about software houses to go and work there, and learn about the tools of the trade, and master those, and really come up with examples. And then if you want to move into investment banking at a later stage, and if there's an opportunity there, come in at a different angle, which is what I did. I came in with basically my internet and e-commerce background brought me back into investment banking, and in the end directly to front office, and that wasn't a traditional route of doing things. Even though I went to King's College and I went to University of Warwick, nowadays you'd think that that'll give you a free pass right into a bank or a consultancy, and I think that that's a lot better than what it used to be. But I had to kind of think and be dynamic and innovative around, how do you move from one place to another, what skills do I need? What knowledge do I need to be heard? And then once you're in, make sure you're heard. And that doesn't mean you have to shout and scream. I think it's about delivery fundamentally.
Yeah, that is very, very insightful and inspiring. How does SocGen actually implement policies when it comes to diversity and inclusion in their programs?
It has a very strong network in terms of women in finance. That's one area that's been really focused on from a gender perspective. And there's also been a big focus on LGBT plus as well. And then we're going to start seeing some now networks around BME, um, um, kind of set up as well. But we've seen, last few years, a lot of changes in the number of women coming in into roles, into the bank, into senior roles, and I think that's great in terms of the work that the bank has done in that respect. And then just general awareness and being very free to talk about things, whatever background or culture you're from. But clearly there needs to be an improvement, and I'm confident we'll see that.
That's very true, and it's really great seeing all these firms including a lot of diversity programs, a lot of inclusion programs for various different diverse backgrounds. And on the current topic of COVID-19, how has COVID-19 actually impacted SocGen, and how has the environment been working from home?
Well, compared to other firms, it's been a big impact, right? It's the same for most of us in the industry. I think what we did a couple of years ago was think about the kind of work from home opportunity that we wanted to provide to our employees, with a work-life balance, right? And we actually provided laptops to everybody in the organization. So the working from home started, like I said, before the pandemic. So having laptops and having a docking station and being set up to work from either from the office or another remote site or a client site, or even from home, we did have that flexibility to do that. Not across all of the bank, but majority of the bank, and we were able to get laptops out to people who didn't have them relatively quickly. But the kind of thought process about work-life balance, working from home, working in the office, was already there. So for us to switch from working in the office to one day and then not working from the office at all and working from home was was a switch, but it wasn't a major switch. I think the switch was around the infrastructure and making sure the infrastructure could handle the fact that there were X thousand people accessing system services remotely from from people's homes. So people's homes Wi-Fi, they're set up with screens, all this sort of thing had to be looked at as well, and we supported where we could, and also improved our infrastructure to handle the load of people, a full capacity working from home. So the transition was challenging, but I think the setup was there to allow us to work from home. Now we're going to see, obviously, with the pandemic is lasting longer than we would all like, and has had an impact, as we talked about, impacting students as well, unfortunately, and the experience that you guys are having. So it's kind of now figuring out, what does this mean going forward? What does this mean in terms of relationships with clients? Because if we think about our client relationships and corporate relationships, that's been very much face to face, flying from one place to another to meet with clients, and that whole paradigm has changed now, right? Literally overnight. So I think there's going to be some thinking around what do clients want, and I think they've got a balance as well, which is I quite like working a few days from home, but I also want to be back in the office as well. So it's working out what that may look like going forward. But it's certainly changed the way we work with clients. I think it's a lot more dynamic. I think it's a lot more task driven in terms of what we need to do internally, as well as what we're doing with clients. And I think a lot of the client needs have changed the way we do things from a process point of view internally. And again, the whole digitalization of our processes and operational side of things has increased quite a lot. Dashboards and having information to hand, it's been a big demand. So we've seen that, and we've had the frameworks and capability to support that. So that was the good thing. We weren't starting completely from scratch.
That's really good, and obviously the sudden move must have been tough, but having those in place beforehand really must have helped. And how do you think the productivity has increased or decreased while working from home? I know that a lot of tech companies have said that the productivity has increased and have offered for people to work from home, like for the long term. So what are your thoughts?
No, well, for us as the digital team, we were kind of practicing this anyway, right? So the ability to work from the office, work from home, work distributed. So that's kind of part and parcel of where we were going towards, regardless. It's difficult for other teams and other areas to think about it, because obviously it's been that whole culture around working together and being at the desk and all that kind of good stuff, which has its benefits. But you also have you have to be mindful about people who have a setup at home that is comfortable for them to do it. So we think about our graduates and our younger team members, or even people who less well off. They're sharing rooms, they're sharing apartments, working from their bedroom. It's not exactly conducive for them. So we need to get that right. And I think that's a switch where we need to think about how do we support people in that context. So I think going forward, I see the balance as being some people want to work from home and they're comfortable with that. Some people want to just get back to the office because they just don't have the setup at home to do that. So we have to be mindful and recognize that as well.
Yeah, that is really insightful, and I'm really sure that companies have adapted to this. And moving forward, I think there's a better infrastructure in place for any sort of hiccups like this. Um, Apart from that, I know that COVID-19 has been affecting a lot of people. But what is the biggest challenge for you in your career? What has the biggest challenge been for you?
Oh wow. Um, Trying to think. I don't know. I've tried to just keep moving forward, keep innovating, keep an eye on technology is a passion of mine anyway. I'm interested in new tech, new ways of doing things, new approaches, and then being pragmatic about how do we kind of make that happen within, you know, organizations, whether it be startups or whether it be within corporate. So for me, there's, that's the challenge, is just to keep myself interested. So the esports is, as I mentioned, is something that I'm really interested in, and I'm also a governor at the University of Chichester, and one of the big things they have there is an esports um, department, which is doing really well. Got some ex-gamers in there, people who commentate. So it's fascinating, that space around behavior, around marketing, around social media. It really is a really massively changing environment, and I think that will have a bearing on what we see, or what we think our day-to-day lives are quite quickly. And the other side is being involved on a charity called Streets of Growth, based in Tower Hamlets across the Canary Wharf, and very challenged young people, I should say, moving them away from drugs and finding opportunities and away from gangs. And I'm a digital trustee for them. So looking at how do we develop digital relationships with young people, and how we support them, and how we look after them as well, and see what digital opportunities and digital businesses that they could develop as well is also quite exciting to me. So challenges, no, I think more just being interested in what's going on, and looking at things that are outside of banking, as well as trying to look at what's going on in banking, and trying to apply that, and using my background and experience to help wherever I can.
Yeah. As you mentioned, you are the governor of the University of Chichester,
Mm,
um, and the digital trustee at Streets of Growth. You've been doing a lot of things outside of your work as well. How do you
mm.
manage all this additional workload, and how do you have time for everything?
Well, I think it's one good thing about SG is it's CSR policy, and it does give you time to um, volunteering time to spend to support these sort of initiatives. I mean, clearly outside of this, I wouldn't be able to do much else, but there are allocated days which I can use for CSR, and I cover my activity with Chichester, University of Chichester, and with Streets of Growth outside using that. But I also, because I'm generally interested and passionate about it, that I do my own time as well. So if I need to do holidays or I need to do weekends, I'm more than happy to do it, because it's a genuine interest and passion of mine to do what I can to help those organizations.
Wow. And yeah, that's really great how you're doing so many things on the outside, trying to help so many different people. And as on a closing note, what would be your final bit of advice for students like me who are just starting out, who have like a long journey ahead of us?
Good question. I think it's Try not to be afraid, because it is a challenging environment, right? Be brave. Try and make the best of the situation that we all find ourselves in. I think the digital space and fintech and technology in itself, there are many opportunities in terms of developing businesses, startups, working within those environments. So be open-minded in terms of opportunities. The open source, push is out there. So there's a lot of things out there. You can still apply your skills at different levels, whether you want to be pure tech, full stack developer, or you want to be a product person or a marketing person or social media. Or there are lots of angles in which people could be engaged and apply those skills in your day to day, and then demonstrate that when you're going for roles and opportunities that you've done that, and in a real and effective manner. Not the avoid the tick box scenario, because that's it's important that people are genuine about why they're doing stuff and the reason why they did it, because that's the interesting part. It's the human part. It's the understanding of why you've done it, what the benefit was, being able to articulate the need and the benefit and the value, as well as the technology aspect. It is really important, because I think people are looking for all-rounders right now, right? And being able to demonstrate that you can do a number of activities, a number of challenges at the same time. Having just one skill or one mindset, it kind of needs to change a little bit, and being able to take into account other things that are there, other things that are going on, and being able to bring some sort of insightfulness into that is important, I think. And just the fact that it's an interesting conversation, right?
Yeah, that's very true. Being all-rounded, being an innovator, those are the biggest stepping stones to becoming successful in the modern day. And with that, I would like to say thank you so much for your time and your incredible insight. I'm sure
No
many of our
problem.
students have been thoroughly inspired by you and your standpoint on innovation and everything else. So thank you so much.
No problem. If anybody wants to reach out, I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to do that, and I'm more than happy to look at people who are looking for roles as internships or trainee roles within my area. Then please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to have the conversations. Or actually
Thank
anything
you.
to do with startups as well. We're obviously interested in people who want to set up startups in the B2B space as well. More than happy to have those conversations. There might be some really good ideas that we haven't thought about, and engage on that basis as well.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for your time. And
Okay,
thank you so
Abraham.
much for those that have been watching. And we'll come next week as part of the series. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Abraham. Take care.
Take care.
Bye bye.